we are going to kick things off here today on Stage X with a panel that was a hit when we did it in Nashville, so we're bringing it back. So I don't know if anybody out there, do you have any fans of the Barbie movie out there? Yeah? What about Swifties? Yeah? New album this week? What about Beehive? Anybody? Yeah. All right, there we go. Okay, good. Well, I'm all three personally, and that's perfect because this panel we're calling Barbies, Beyonce, Swifties, the Women's Revolution is here. And so I'm going to be turning things over to Jane Swift, no relation to Taylor, unfortunately. She is a former governor of Massachusetts and president of Education at Work. And she is going to be moderating our discussion. She'll be joined on stage by Ashley Andersen Zantop, the chairman and CEO of Cambium Learning Group. We have Jamie Candee, the CEO of Edmentum, Kate Eberle Walker, the CEO of Presence, and Phyllis Lockett, the founder and CEO of Leap Innovations. So we're really thrilled to have them here for this conversation. So without further ado, here to discuss the women's revolution, please give it up for our panel.
So I think there's actually one more woman we should have added to the title since we did this in Nashville. Are there any Caitlin Clark fans out there? All righty. Well, I am thrilled to be here, although it's also the third day of the session. And this is a repeat, and it went really well in Nashville. And sometimes when you do something a second time, it's not as good. So we're determined to make it just as good, if not better. And what we all determined in Nashville is that the revolution is here, but it is not finished. And I want to give you all a little bit of a chance to stretch and to demonstrate my point. So we're gonna have a little interactive activity here at the beginning. So listen carefully. My mother was a Catholic school teacher. I won't hit anybody if you don't listen, but you do need to listen. So, if you spent more than 3 to 5 minutes planning your wardrobe for your most important meeting at GSV, please stand up.
Does it count if this is your most important meeting?
Now, if you believe that the outcome of that meeting would be determined by what you wore, please remain standing. So here's the thing. Until the gender makeup of those answers, and we can sit down, changes, the revolution will not be over. And some of you weren't honest. And Deb actually told me, Deb doesn't really ask me anything, she tells me things. Deb told me I was not nervous for this panel, but I am nervous for this panel. I'm not gonna introduce these women, you should know all of them. They're all hanging in larger than life in the Hall of Fame. They are leading the largest, most important companies and nonprofits in our industry. So if you don't know who they are, you probably shouldn't be at this conference, or you should find out. But they also happen to be my friends and my colleagues, but they are not as important to me as my 3 daughters who have just entered the workforce. And for me to do this panel well today, the reason that I am nervous, Deb, is I need to get them to be deeply honest about the parts of the revolution that still need to be addressed without getting them in trouble, and push them as far as I possibly can to make progress for my daughters and their daughters and all of our daughters and young women entering the workforce. So let's go. I didn't say LFG, Deb. I'm gonna be really good on this one. Promised my mother. So, Jamie and Kate, we're gonna start with you. You guys have talked about how the revolution feels so different when you're working with predominantly female teams that you've assembled. And I've noted that 20 years ago, I'm old, when I was governor, I actually didn't have that luxury. I was counseled to surround myself with white men, or as someone mentioned to me earlier with my team, mediocre white men, and to make sure that I was taken seriously to do that. So it's progress that you're able to assemble the teams that you feel comfortable with. I want to call that progress out. But I also want you each to talk. We'll start with you, Jamie, and then we'll go to Kate, about the practical ways that you see your teams being more productive and your leadership being more effective and authentic when you have the freedom to assemble the team that you want.
Thank you, and thank you, Deborah, GSV, Jane, for bringing this. We had a lot of fun if you were at Nashville. It was a very enjoyable conversation, so thank you for having us again. So, I think in looking at everyone's leadership team who's on the stage, they are predominantly women, but the way that I think about the curation or composition of your leadership team, right, is very thoughtful diversity of who you have on that team, why they matter, and what they bring to the table. And the most important thing in our leadership team at Edmentum, we have amazing female leaders at the executive level and at the senior leadership level, but it's very much about making sure that they bring their authentic selves to the table and that they're constantly thinking about how do we bring up the next generation of female leaders. So we talk about that a lot, succession planning and the way in which we can work together to make sure that we've got a very lively, active, diverse leadership team. So the curation process, I actually think when you get to the phase that at least I'm in at Edmentum, it is a constant process of thinking about who do we need, how do we make sure we have great women and men at the table, and how do we make sure that we're creating a culture of inclusion, of empathy, of speaking up, talking about what it takes to get to the next level as an organization and as a leadership team. So I think it's a very active process is my point.
Totally agree. So at present, our corporate employee base is over 80% women, and we have a network of 2,000 therapists who are 96% women. So it felt important to me when I came into the company to have our leadership team reflect that and represent that. And we do today have our COO, CFO, and Chief Commercial Officer, in addition to me, are all women on the leadership team. What I didn't expect were some of the other ways that that would change even my own experience and my own leadership. And a couple of things stand out to me. One is that I noticed that I think because we were, because our layers of employees could maybe identify with us more, felt more comfortable, could relate to us, I really feel like the distance between leadership and the next level and the next level has gotten smaller, and people really talk to us and tell us what they actually think and will ask for time in a way that is unbelievably valuable in helping us really understand what we need to do as leaders. That's one. The other thing is actually that the dialogues we're having in our leadership team in our meetings have shifted. And I think that, every leader is different, but I will say, perhaps a more female approach to communication and dialogue in these executive meetings is to share observations, to ask questions, to listen, not to be sort of, opinion first or like stating your position outwardly, but to, kind of work to something together. Whereas some of the men that I've had on my teams have come in more, kind of stepping out with like, here's what I think, putting that opinion out there. And I've watched our whole team, including the men on the team, kind of change the way that we work and see people coming into our meetings with observations to share, with questions to ask, and a more, I'd say, dialogue-based leadership, and it's very cool. I'm finding that it's a much more natural way for us to lead our people.
And do you feel like your customers are better served by that?
Well, our customers are also majority female. I mean, we are serving K through 12 schools. We're working with special education leaders across the country. Vast majority are women, and they talk to us and they share a lot of their observations and perspectives with us. And I think they feel like we take them, we process them, we listen to them, and we come back with something that's responsive.
So, Ashley, we did pre-calls when we were doing this, and I loved the call out that you had to all of us, which is it doesn't matter whether or not we get to equal power if when we get there, we don't use our power differently. And so I'm hoping you can talk to us about how in your very powerful position, you use your power differently at work.
I love this question. I think it's such an important one. But I think in order to talk about it well, we have to talk about what it means to be a leader and the different types of leadership there are. Because we spend a lot of time in lots of ways as a society celebrating leaders and celebrating people who we see successfully overcome barriers and navigate obstacles. And we should, because that's amazing. But that's not the only type of leadership that we should recognize and celebrate. And I think just as Maslow has sort of given us the hierarchy of needs, there is in fact a hierarchy of leadership. And this is something that's important for us all to be aware of and think about which level are we operating on. So I think first there's the level of just really hard work, like doing hard work, learning the things that need to be learned, holding ourselves accountable for doing that hard work and learning the things that need to be learned. That's sort of a base level of leadership. The next level of leadership up is actually navigating the barriers to continuing success, like figuring out how to get through the system and reach a level of success. The next level of leadership is about teaching others to do that. So helping other people understand how to navigate those barriers, have access to opportunity. And then the pinnacle, the top of the pyramid, is really about saying, okay, I've reached this point where I'm having success, I have agency, I have some power, I have span of influence and impact, and what am I doing with that power or that agency to remove those barriers that other leaders have figured out how to navigate, and so have I, and that I've taught other people how to figure out how to navigate. And we are really not in the business of creating opportunity for all unless we are in the business of removing those barriers. So that's part of the reason I'm talking about this hierarchy of leadership, because we aren't creating opportunity for all unless we're removing those barriers. And I would just say really quickly, sometimes that's really exciting, flashy, important, social media worthy work, and sometimes it is really detail-oriented, kind of in the weeds, boring work. And I would call out as an example, Jane, we think about some of the basic things that keep people from being able to succeed and actively pursue their own success and the success of others, and that comes down to basic things like policies. So one of the things that we've really spent time and effort in, and I have to congratulate our Chief People Officer, Melissa Yates-May, in pursuing relentlessly, is our own policies for basic things like leave. Think about this. So leave policies are critically important to helping people have an opportunity to actually engage in the workforce, not just for women, but for men. Because women can actively participate in their own success, their team's success, the workforce, and their own future leadership if they have the leave that they need that allows them to stay part of the workforce, and if their partners have the leave that they need so that women can actively participate in the workforce. And that's just an example, a basic example of something like that.
So that sets me up perfectly for the question that I'm going to ask Phyllis, although before I do, I just want you all to deeply appreciate Phyllis, who had to fill in for someone at the last minute. And Phyllis saw our panel in Nashville, where I started talking about sex and menopause. And so, she made the choice to still come on and do this panel, having no idea what I would say or what I might ask her, which she still doesn't, because I could say anything, right? And Jamie knows, and Ashley had to do the prep call with me while my mother was haranguing me to go watch the eclipse with her and put my glasses on. So that's my life. But I have talked a lot, and I started this by talking about my own daughters who are in the workforce, and about the terrible call I got about 6 months ago when they had both had some bad gender experiences, and basically said to me, "I thought, Mom, you said it was better." One of the things that I'm glad to say is it actually, it is better. It's not perfect. But one of the reasons I think our daughters believe, right, that it's going to be better is because of Title IX. Oh, Caitlin Clark. And more money, more people watching the women's Final Four than the men's Final Four. Just had to get it in there. But I think it's created something of a false sense of what the world they're going to find out there looks like. So, what do we as leaders, all of these women, as I said, are in the Hall of Fame, look at their pictures. How should we be preparing young women for the reality that they're going to see in the workplace?
Thank you, Jane. And yes, I'm here. I hope Kaya Henderson feels better. I am a black woman, but I am not Kaya Henderson, for any of you who are looking on the app to see. But I was voluntoed by Deborah Quazzo to be here, so this is where I am. And I've not prepared for my questions, so just bear with me. I think that we've got to do a better job mentoring our young women. And you know, it's fascinating to me, having been, and many of you on this panel are firsts, right? And it's extraordinary that in 2020 plus, we're still experiencing being the first. And I remember, I'm going to tell this one story about one of my experiences in working for a very powerful man in Chicago, who I was organizing a big project. And I ended up hiring a woman who was incredibly capable. We had a long-standing relationship. She happened to be married to one of our colleagues. I didn't think of anything about it. I brought her in to lead this important initiative, and we were ushered in. You know, the big boss brought us, my colleague, who was her husband, and me into his office and said, this is nepotism. What are you doing? And I said, no, not at all. Like, look at this woman's resume. She is outstanding. How could you think that her credentials could be reduced to she was, hired because she's married to this guy? And he slammed his hand on the desk and said to me, I don't care who you're, because I was involved with a very political person in Chicago, I don't care who you're sleeping with. Get rid of her. And I was shocked. It was the most disgusting moment in my full career, and I have had a long one. But there were two things that were going on. One, that her credentials were being reduced, but the other was that my decision making, right, wasn't at par. So there are real situations that happen like that, and I will say that my niece, who just graduated from Booth, is in investment banking in New York, is dealing with the same stuff, the same things. So I think, back to your question, we have to do a better job mentoring young women and setting up expectation. On our college campuses, our college campuses are much more progressive. So we're setting up a false narrative, I think, so that when they get into the real world, the expectation of having diversity, the expectation that my voice can be heard, is sometimes not the case.
So I'm going to skip to the question that I have for Kate. Jamie, I will get back to your question because I think it's a great segue. So here's the coda to my daughter's story. Both of them have changed jobs. They're in bigger jobs, making more money in the same industry, and doing great. Which there's a lesson, I think, for employers, right? We are in a time, right, of tight labor markets. Like my daughters, folks don't need to fuss, they don't need to complain, unlike when you were being accused of what you were being accused of, some of the things that I put up with as a first, we didn't have the luxury that they have of voting with their feet. And talent today can vote with their feet. And so I want to hear from Kate, right? Like, it may not, it's pretty obvious, I hope, that you should not accuse your female employees of having sex with someone, and that's why, unless you, that's the kind of stuff, there's obvious, but there's a lot of subtle things that happen that make women feel not supported. And so what advice do you have, Kate? Because that's what happens at the end of the revolution, right? The really bad stuff starts to go away, but the subtle stuff, right, of not feeling supported, still can wear down leaders, entry-level employees. So what might some of our colleagues here not know, because they won't know unless we say it, about how they ensure that women in their companies feel supported?
Yes. So I wrote a book about this. It's called The Good Boss: 9 Ways Every Manager Can Support Women at Work. And most of the ideas and suggestions in the book are about really seemingly small things that everyone needs to pay attention to and be sensitive to in how people are experiencing the workplace differently. And when you get to these smaller things that are not so blatantly obvious that everybody knows what it was, and you're sort of like, did he ask me that differently because I'm a woman? Would that be a problem if I were a man? I still ask myself that often, and one of the most helpful things for me has been my network of other female leaders and being honest with each other, because I still get in my own head, like, well, maybe it's not that, maybe I'm making too big a deal out of it, and then when I can talk it through with other people and just and have it reaffirmed, for better or for worse, like, no, that happens to me too. This happens to me. What about this? What about that? I think that's part of it. It's the mentoring. I agree with you, Phyllis, but it's also that very honest network and support system to say, it's not all perfect, and people are judging any leader with a point of view and a bias, and aren't always paying attention to might that be about style, might that be about communication approach, as opposed to about competence and capabilities. I think it's telling, by the way, that when I think of all of my, everyone has their sort of closed groups of trusted advisors and colleagues, of which you all are certainly a part of mine. I think it's telling that all of mine are women. It's all other female CEOs. I don't do that in the same way with male CEOs, and I think it's because the truth is the experience is still really different.
Well, and that's progress too, that you can find them, right? And that was my mother's great piece of wisdom when I was the only woman with having children, right, as governor, and I had all these dumb answers that not that my staff was dumb, but they had answers that were unanswerable, or questions that were unanswerable, and my mom finally said, just tell them it's hard to be first. But when you're first, but there are other firsts around you, it becomes easier, which gets me, actually, it's a better segue than what I planned, not surprisingly, for the question I wanted to ask Jamie next, which, as we talk about the revolution needing more work, as we look at, I know there was a panel here by Lean In, and there's some research out there about the fact that we're losing, across all sectors, more women CEOs and more women leaders at this moment, where there are a lot of challenges in society as well as in our economy. Yet, we were all at the ladies' lunch, where we're celebrating enormous progress for women in the education innovation sector. But we know that a lot of that progress came during a very robust market for ed tech. And we also know that we're seeing retrenchment and consolidation of that market. There are a lot of stereotypes about the kinds of markets that women are good at leading in, and perhaps some tired stereotypes about markets that women aren't as good at leading in. So, what do we need to do to protect against not having fewer powerful women at next year's ladies' lunch?
It's a great question, thank you. So thinking about this question, I reflected on the last couple of years, and for those of us that have been leading education organizations, as Jane said, any of us in education, it's been a ton of volatility. It's just been a ton of volatility in general in the world. And when you talk to people about, okay, what do you do, who do you send in as leaders to deal with that volatility? And as Kate just talked about, I'm very grateful for the mentorship. Jane's one of my mentors. This entire panel of women I learn from every time I'm in their presence. It's really, really important to build up that network of mentors and of colleagues. And over the last couple of years, as we've been working through what will be this evolution in education, I've asked a lot of questions to people, to other leaders, CEOs of education organizations, how are you dealing with it? And I talk to men and women, and there are many amazing men also running education companies. And it's interesting when you listen to the answers that you get around, okay, who are you sending in, or what has been the process for how you deal with volatility? And when I talk to men, they always talk about other men who've come in to fix the turnaround or fix the volatility. Not once have they given me the name of a woman who's come in to fix the volatility. When I talk to my female colleagues, peers, you, Jane, because you and I have had this conversation many times, it's interesting the list of people that you'll get from, at least in my network, my experience. Women will come back with a whole host of men and women that they can think of. And so I think one call to action is all of us in this room, we should be thinking about who are the great leaders, who are the great fixers, who are the people you send in to mentor, support. And let's make sure that it's like a diverse set of women and men, because there is extraordinary women doing extraordinary work across philanthropy, nonprofit, for-profit, education in the sector, all across. So that, I think, is very, very important. The second piece is never forget what it felt like. I say this to myself all the time, and you and I have talked about this and others. I remember a time when I was the only woman at the table, and it actually wasn't that long ago. And when you start running a company and it becomes bigger and your challenges are complex, it can be easy to forget about that. Never let yourself forget what it felt like to be the only woman at the table. And each and every day, wake up thinking about how you give that back. How do you make sure you are empowering other women, getting more women to the table? My daughter was 10 months old when I first became CEO at my last company. And we had one woman at the board table besides me. She was an observer, and she often had to sit kind of like in the back. Fast forward to today, she is a lead investor at a major private equity firm who she was just here, spoke on some panels. And to see that evolution over the last 12 years or so is pretty incredible, and it's exciting. But I still remember like it was yesterday, what it felt like to be the only woman, how hard you worked, the outfit that you had to think about that you'd put on, don't look, heels, should I wear heels, not heels, would I be taken seriously? Like all of those things we shouldn't have to think about as we're building these great organizations and supporting kids and teachers, but you do. And so now as I look at the team that we've assembled at Edmentum and all these amazing women that I have the privilege of working with, it's that constant thought of like, how do I reach out? How do I stay connected? Even in the really hard times in the last couple of years, there's been a lot as we've navigated post-pandemic. But keeping those connections, building up every woman. And last thing is, this is not a competition. There are enough seats at the table, and as women, we have to make sure that we are building each other up and creating opportunity and not competing for what we believe might be the scarce number of senior positions available, because we are the ones who are holding us back from making more positions available by feeling like it's a competition. And I actually see that happening quite frequently, and I'm asking all of us to think about like, every single one of us has an opportunity to get to that table. It's our job to create the opportunity.
Hey, Jane, can I make one point about
Yes.
that?
I was going to go to you next, but yes.
Important. So, Jamie, I think what you said there is so powerful, and I think what you said also comes back to the general concept of creating opportunity, meaningful opportunity for all. Right? If we think about what it means to create meaningful opportunity for all, that isn't about just changing out who's sitting in the current seats that have opportunity with one group for another group, because that's not creating opportunity for all, that's just creating opportunity for a different group, right? When we think about what creating opportunity for all means, it means we have to know and understand and believe that opportunity is not a zero-sum game. Opportunity creates opportunity. Opportunity is that ongoing energy source that everybody's looking for that actually makes more of itself. And that's what we have to remember as we pursue this work. And that actually means that each one of us, whoever we are and whatever we are, whatever our identities are, we each of us have a responsibility and a call to action to think about the ways that we can help make opportunity for not only ourselves and those we care about, but for all. And that might be big structural things, like some of the things that we're talking about, big workforce decisions, or that could be really small daily things. One thing I have to call out our Chief Operating Officer, Kemi Rose, who's here with us today, about is she started a tradition early on in her tenure at Cambium of sending me an email of folks she wanted to call out on her teams who had done something great that week. Somebody who had just done something really terrific, something that I might not have seen otherwise in my role, so that I could give that person a shout out. I will say, not only has she continued to do that, but she's institutionalized that in the form of a dashboard that her team members, she and her team members contribute to every 2 weeks, and some of her team members who do that are here. Our Chief Legal Officer, Ryan Brown, our Chief Marketing Officer, John Jorgensen. Every week they add to that dashboard and call out the people on their teams that I might not know because I might not have interactions with them, for somebody who's done something great for the organization, so I can give a shout out to that person. I can call that out. I can say thank you for being here, whether you're a woman or a man, whatever your identity is, and that makes a real difference.
So I was just starting my new job as the president of education at work, and we did this panel last time, and you talked about that, and guess what? I do Friday shout-outs now. So thank you. It's great. And I thought I was already an extraordinary leader, and whatever is like super extraordinary, that's me because of Ashley. But I think one of the things that I've noticed about my daughters and their generation is they believe in that expanding opportunity. They do not believe it's a zero-sum game. I do not see the, only one of us is going to make it. And again, I know I brought up Caitlin Clark, and we talk about Taylor Swift, but their generation has realized what Title IX gave many of us a false sense of promise toward. I believed it and then got smacked down, but you keep moving. We've talked about mentoring. We've talked about the kinds of ways that you mentor, but I want you to talk, Phyllis, what do we need to be sensitive about? Because it is different when we're mentoring young women and women of color.
Thanks for that, and I want to reinforce what Ashley said. It literally is about uplifting all, and I think as women, we've got to make room, but we have to make room, right? We have to make room for all kinds of ideas and for other women. So when there are those recommendations that are coming our way, let's make sure we're uplifting a woman. I mean, one of the things I'll say, Deb Quazzo, she shares her platform. She makes room for others to come. And that's how the best women have achieved at boards that I'm on. I was the first black woman on one of the boards that I serve on, and I've been involved from a nominating governance standpoint. We have 7 now. So sometimes when you're the only one, you think, okay, that's it, I got to hold on as tight as possible. It's not true. And I think as a woman and as a black woman, you have to have the confidence to show up, to stay at that table. What I will say is this, and I've shared a really big personal insult. I didn't feel like I could afford to walk. I think that's the challenge. And the problem is if you're inherently absolving the insult, and we get many. Some are subtle, some are more blatant, as I just described. But if we walk, then who's there? We lose our position. So I think we have to do a little bit more. We have to have that resilience gene and that extra, Teflon to just push through, so we can be the bridge, so others can follow.
And when you don't feel it, you fake it. I'm not going to bring up a sex analogy there, I promise, even though I don't see Deb. But women might be better. I'm just saying, at faking. That was also to see if the people in back were paying attention. Just saying. So we're going to move on to our lightning round. No one will ever do a panel with me again, but I might get a book deal. Anyway, lightning round. When we did this panel before, and maybe the reason that Phyllis decided to do it, Kate brought us all a badass bracelet that is sort of a trend at the Swiftie conferences. I wore mine until it dissolved and fell off, probably in places I should not have worn it, but it was such a treasure and gift. So I'm going to ask each of you, if you had a permanent, and they're called friendship bracelets, I want to call them Swiftie bracelets, but we'll call them permanent friendship bracelets, what would they say? We'll just Go down the aisle. Ashley?
Okay. Until Monday, mine would have said the 3 principles that I strive to hold myself accountable to as a leader. It would have said tenacity, empathy, and allyship. On Monday, though, we had the real honor and privilege at the Power of Women Awards Ladies' Lunch to hear Ruby Bridges speak to us. And I know, Phyllis, you had an opportunity to interview Ruby Bridges, and so others of you had a chance to hear her speak as well. And Ruby said to us at this lunch that we cannot afford to be a hopeless people. We cannot afford to just give up. We don't have the luxury or the right to just say, forget it, this is too hard. And so I think I would have to add to tenacity, empathy, and allyship, hope. I agree with that, and I'm so glad I had the opportunity to hear Ruby say that. Deb, thank you for making that opportunity possible.
Jamie?
Thank you. Yes, that's on my computer screen at home. You know, you've got your monitors, and I have a little sticky that during the pandemic I wrote, and I don't know where I got it or why I thought of it, but I wrote "Outlast," and I put that sticky up on my computer, and I look at it every day when I'm working, and what it means is outlast all the challenges, stay true. When I think about what it means in terms of staying true to your integrity, your character, your role as a leader. I love what you said about the pinnacle of leadership, Ashley, because that is what we should all be continually striving for. And so with every challenge, every roadblock that becomes before you, like outlast, just the grit, the hustle, stay focused, empower others, work hard. And so for me, that would be mine, outlast.
I like that. Since we all convened in Nashville and I brought you Swiftie friendship bracelets, I've actually shifted loyalties a little bit and I've become a huge Olivia Rodrigo fan. And so my bracelet would say what my custom-made t-shirt says, which is a lyric from one of Olivia's songs that I love. I am built like a mother and a total machine. And I find that so empowering that I like to say it to myself.
I love that.
That's great, but I still want my friendship bracelet, Kate.
You're getting it. You're getting it.
I'd say faith. I really think, faith from, I'm a Christian and I'm anchored in faith, but the faith is the belief of something bigger that we can't see. And I think on those days that are really hard, and this work is really hard, or when you're feeling that you're just pushing against the grain, it's that faith that you have to have within yourself. It's that faith that you have to display as a leader to get you beyond and to continue to push toward your vision.
So I will also answer the question, even though I'm the moderator. Probably I was thinking I should say survivor. Some of you who are here who I told you couldn't hug me, and I know is desperately disappointing, know that I broke a rib and 2 fingers last week on my farm. So maybe it should be crash. But actually, the word I switched, this is shocking and not strategic. It's inspiring. I switched my first word, Wordle, a couple of months ago. I did.
It's not media?
No, I made it grace. And it isn't always terrible, but in my head, I then start my day every day with grace, and you all get it. I totally need it. So, last thing, best female CEO or leader. I mean, it could be a governor. Past.
Do you mean a former governor?
I said past or present.
Okay.
I said past or present, best leader. And you can't say Ruby Bridges again. Because Deb will think I didn't do the prep call, and I'm done, off the stage.
Okay.
We'll go this way. Maybe somebody else will say Ruby Bridges.
I thought you said CEO.
I said CEO or leader.
Oh.
I got all caught up. Or like.
All right. I prepare for CEO in the first 5 minutes.
CEO.
All right. Ursula Burns. She was the first
yeah.
African American woman to lead a Fortune 500 company.
Woo woo.
Nice. I'm going to say Jessie Woolley Wilson, who is not only an amazing CEO, but she's someone who, to me, was up on a pedestal as perfection could do no wrong. And as part of her mentorship as me, she has been real about some moments where she faced some of the same challenges that I have.
Awesome.
There are many. Mary
No,
Barr,
I said one.
one. I know. I'm not going to
Okay.
say many. I'm going to say maybe two because we have to say one thing about you. Give us a second. Mary Barra, General Motors CEO, amazing. If you study her leadership, there's a lot of challenges that come with leading a Fortune 500 company, and she actually is a very authentic, empathetic, high-performing leader. So I just think she's a rock star. So that's one. We have to call you out, Jane. So yes.
I think I called myself out.
Well, we'll also call you out, and here's why. For those of you that have had the opportunity to just be in Jane's aura and to understand what she went through when she was governor and since then, and how many women in this room and in this industry and beyond this industry she has lifted up, empowered, and created opportunity for, there's more than we can possibly count. So thank you.
Blessing.
Okay, so I don't really have to look too much further than directly to my right to see 4 amazing candidates for that. But if we want to think about who our best CEO, women leader, governor, past or present, maybe let's add to that future, because I think the best women leaders, past, present, and future, are going to be the ones that this room raises. This room raises because these future women leaders not only get to learn from everybody we were just talking about who came before us, whose shoulders that we are standing on, whose mistakes and hard lessons and hard work we learn from, but this room collectively is going to teach our next generation and is doing it right now, is setting the example right now by the work you're doing, being here to be the next best woman leader. So I'm excited for them.
Love that. And that's a wrap.